Hello everybody. Okay, so my story time video for today is the time that I was followed home by someone. Now, I was married at the time, which this was back in, I believe, it was 2002, I believe. And I went to the store and I had my kids with me, and all my kids at the time were all under 8 years old. So they were young. And I just left the store, and it takes 40 minutes to get to the store one way from where I live, because I live in the country. And I left the store and it was kind of evening, but it wasn't dark yet. And when I made my first turn, there was this guy in this truck and he was behind me. And I didn't think anything of it at first. But then I noticed that about 30 minutes into the drive, probably about 3 miles or so before I got home, this guy was still behind me. And it was at one point at that time, I can't remember what happened, but somehow he got around me. I can't remember how or why, but he had to go around me. And when I went to turn, he was in front of me, and he must have been watching me, because as soon as I put my turn signal on to turn, he quickly turned his on and turned real quick. Now, what I probably should have done is I probably should have just went straight and went the long way home, but I didn't. So I turned, and then he sped up, and so he was kind of like out of my sight. And then when I got down the road, he had pulled over, and after I went by, he got up behind me. At this point, I knew he was following me. And I started thinking, well, I know my husband's not home, and I had my babies in the back. And so I was almost home, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not going home with nobody being there and being by myself. So I seen that my neighbors were home, so I pulled up into their driveway. And I told her, I said, this guy followed me all the way from, Lawrenceburg, where I was at the store. And the guy drove past, back and forth really fast, and revved up his engine as he was going by. And I said, I can't go home because, nobody's there. I don't want to go there. I don't want to be there by myself, and I got the kids. So at that point, I was able to get a hold of my husband, because at that time is where it, not everybody had a cell phone, but it was getting to the times where everybody was starting to get one. And so I called him, and I told him this guy had followed me, and I didn't want to come home until he was there. And he says, okay. He goes, well, I'm on my way home now. He says, so why don't you go ahead and head on over? Because at this point, I was only about a quarter mile from my house. So I was like, okay. So I went ahead, went home, met him in the driveway. And we got the groceries and everything unloaded, and, got into the house. And he said, I got to go to town real quick. He said, but I'll be right back. And he said, here. And he got the gun, and he made sure it was loaded. And he said, if he comes back, he said, shoot first and ask questions later. And I said, I don't know if I could do that. He goes, like I said, if he comes back, shoot first, ask questions later, because this isn't just protecting you, it's protecting the kids. At that point, I was like, okay. So he left, and he drives a truck too. And at this point, when he left, it was now dark. So he left, and not even it wasn't even a minute after he had left, I heard the engine, and I thought he forgot something and came back. But then I realized it wasn't him, it was that guy that followed me. So now he knows where I live. And I was like, oh. And at that point, I told the kids, I said, run upstairs. And I said, don't come down. I said, be really quiet and don't come down until I tell you it's okay. I said, no matter what you hear, because I didn't know what was going to happen or if anything was going to happen. So they ran upstairs, and I grabbed the gun, and I had my doors locked, but I had this shade on my door, and I walked over to the door, and this guy was driving by real slow, and then he flew down the road, turned around and came back, and then when he came back, he stopped in front of my house. At that point, I raised the shade to show him that I had a gun in my hand. And I couldn't see him, I couldn't see his face because it was dark. And he sat there for a good 3 minutes. And at the time, I just remember standing there, had the gun clenched in my hands, and just hoping and praying that he wasn't going to get out of the truck. But I did not take my eye off of him, or off the truck. I did not take my eyes off. And it was, I guess you could call it kind of like not really staring him down because I couldn't see him, but just more as in, I'm not taking my eyes off you. I'm going to, and waiting to see if he was going to get out of that truck. And then finally, he sped off really fast. And I didn't know if he was going to come back. So then, about a couple minutes right after he sped off, my husband came back home, and I told him the guy had come back, and I told him what had happened, and I said, you're not going anywhere, are you? And he said, no. He said, I'm home for the night, I'm not going nowhere, which I was relieved because that really scared the hell out of me. And I tell you, I don't know why he targeted me. I don't know what his intentions were, but I do know that it's something I'll never forget, because it scared me, and I am glad that I had noticed it, because it wasn't like a paranoid thing, because like I said at first, I didn't think anything of it. Okay, somebody's behind me, they probably live out there too. It's not unheard of or whatever. But it was when he got around me and then pulled over and then got up behind me and started following me, and then, sped back and forth past my neighbors while I was at her house, and then coming back once I got home, and first going by really slow and then turning around, coming back and stopping. So that's not being paranoid, that's what had happened. And I had thanked God that whatever he was thinking or whatever his plans were, that he didn't follow through and he just took off. Because I don't think that would be an image, whether I'd have to shoot somebody, kill somebody, or just what would happen, whatever his intentions were. I don't think that is something I would be able to get out of my head, if I had to kill somebody, for the protection of myself and my children. And I remember I once was telling this story to somebody, and they asked me, they said, oh, I guess it kind of made me mad because I guess they thought I was lying. They said, well, afterwards, did you go on Facebook and post? I was like, no. I said, this was before MySpace and Facebook was a thing. I said, at the time, I said, those were the times that you get on, you know, in the Yahoo chat rooms, you know, and chat with people. I said, this wasn't the time that, you know, you got on MySpace and Facebook and all that stupid crap. I said, this was before all the social media hype and all that bull crap. But it really did scare the hell out of me. And had I not paid attention and thought about what I was going to do before I got home, there's no telling what would have happened, because there's nobody that at the time that lived around me. You know, my closest neighbor was a quarter mile away. So being out in the middle of nowhere like that, and knowing that nobody's home and you're by yourself, you know, nobody's going to know. There's no witnesses, you know, because there's nobody around. And so that was just, I guess, protective thinking, I guess, on my part, because I had my kids with me, and you know, anybody who knows me knows I'm very protective of my kids. So I'm glad that I was thinking about that at that time. But it's definitely something I will never I will never forget, because that was really, really scary. So that's my video for today, and I will see you all next week. Bye.